Hey folks, today we're covering Developer Diary 6 Military and Warfare for EU5. This is going to cover units, buildings, how warfare actually takes place in the game, and a bunch of other things as well. So as always, if you enjoy the video today, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But let's just get straight into it. So as they say, war during the modern era was constantly evolving. It went from late medieval armies made of knights and levies to professionalized armies with gunpowder and destruction power never seen before, to end up at the beginning of the 19th century a mass conscription force wielding efficiently both manpower and shock as well. And that is covered in the entirety of this game. Because the game starts earlier than EU4 did, we are going from those late medieval armies, as they said, knights and levies, to fully professional armies, and the differences you will encounter as you progress through the game, get the different advances, go through the ages. You will see that play out as well. And then as we've seen through all these dev diaries, they mention it here, everything in EU5 is kind of intertwined together. So armies are not just units, they're made of people, logistical matters, and the world itself will fight back against your dreams of conquest. So as they say, you know, everyone who fights in your levies, they're getting pulled out of farms, out of buildings to fight in your wars, and they're going to cover that in the first part of this dev diary. But then also you need to feed the armies. And then if you're fighting in winter, the winter itself is going to try kill your armies as well. So all these different factors coming into your army, into your warfare, and how you will play out your campaigns. The first thing they're going to show us here is a war scream from France and England in 1351. There's a lot of information here, but it's really just on the left-hand side, France, all their vassals and things like that below them. You can see how many people are fighting for them, how many ships, their current morale, and different information as well. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the same things for England. So you've got England and then their vassals, Durham, Wales, the Pale, Lancaster, all these different vassals that will also help them in the fight as well. You can see their army size and some other information there as well, but they're going to break down a whole bunch of this in this dev diary. That is during the 100 Years' War, something you will encounter very early in this game. So the first era they're going to cover in this dev diary is the late medieval warfare. So the beginning of EU5, most states don't field a professional army, but there are a few that do have access to them. To fight in multiple wars started by many kings and dukes, each state relied on levies, raised from their own population, so peasants, burghers, nobles, the estates that we have in this game. However, your laws and institutions can call upon, because some of these you can have laws that ban them from the army. The nobles can come to you and say, hey, we don't want to fight in your army. We're not going to be able to be raised up as levies, and then you have to deal with that if you do agree to it. So you can see here the Kingdom of France raised levies, and then a breakdown of all the locations those troops are going to come from. And then you can see the effects of raising these as a levy as well. The population raised into a levy will reduce the population by 1 each as their families follow them, for a total of 8,000 in this example. While the levies are raised, any surviving levies will return to the place they came from, and then also the effect of this, you'll receive minus 20% for your food production and raw materials production as well for every location you raise a levy. So this is important at the beginning. You're not just going to be raising levies willy-nilly. I'm just going to take my army off into inconsequential wars, because those people you raise up into your army, they're getting taken out of those locations, less people to work in those buildings. And then as you can also see, that minus 20% raw materials and food production, that can hit you pretty badly, especially if you're raising a lot of levies from a certain area. So you have got to take that into account, especially early on in the game. Obviously, if those people die, then you need to replenish them through birth rates and things like that. You can get people to migrate into your country, but it's not like Crusader Kings where you can just wipe your levy constantly. Oh well, I'll just wait for it to replenish, get back to it, and it doesn't really affect you. In EU5, those population are gone, and they can't then be working for you, doing other things for your realm as well. So as you can see, these people raised by the army are real members of your population, and they will leave their jobs to fight in your wars, which means that when they down the battlefield, as we were just saying, this population is gone forever. But of course, if you do disband these armies, they do return to their normal life and they will go back to their jobs. The quality of the levy you raise will vary by population type. A peasant levy will probably be the backbone of your army just because you've got the most of those in your realm, but these will be undisciplined spearmen at the front of your army. Different populations produce levies with distinct equipment, discipline, and a role on the battlefield, and they don't mention it, but it actually looks like that in the army graphics. They covered that in an earlier dev diary that I did cover on the channel, like how the armies actually look on the map, and they actually look different depending on what kind of troops you have in there. It's really fun how it looks. And then as you progress through the era, they get more and more disciplined until you get like the classical, like Napoleon kind of uniform look as well. So you can see an example of this here. This is the 6th Army of Castile, I believe. You can see the picture there of the kind of troops it is. You can see the general, you can see the feudal levies, the footman levy, the mailed knights. So all the different estates bring in different troops when you raise that levy. So these levies come in different types, as they just said, depending on where they come from. Peasants make standard levies, burghers and clergy make footmen, and nobles make knights, although some of that can change depending on what advances you've got. They're going to talk about that later on as well. And these levies, unlike Crusader Kings, if your levies get damaged, you just stay in a location and they gradually replenish, and then you can get back to your warfare. In EU5, if your army is damaged, it doesn't replenish. It doesn't just magically get more people in it. You have to disband the levy army and then re-raise it in those areas. So if you're constantly wiping your army, you're getting through a lot of your population as you keep bringing them back up. That's why you got to be more selective with your wars, especially early in the game, because you can really deplenish your realm. Depending on how big it is, you can really cause problems for your industry and other operations that you're trying to do as well. And then, as they said, you do progress through the eras of warfare, so transitioning to a standing army. As technology and institutions develop, you'll unlock the means to field a standing army, as well as many new military buildings that can employ a particular class of population, and that is soldiers. Soldiers are employed in buildings that generate manpower for your standing armies, such as the armory, as well as being used for castle garrisons and other military-based buildings. So the first one they're going to show us here is the armory. You can see monthly manpower plus 10. Can recruit regiments here, yes. The production method, if this is your first dev diary, these are the things that you need to make these as efficient as possible as buildings. If you're missing, say, half of these, it's only half as efficient as a building. So it would be slower at making manpower and things like that. So you need to take that into account. Can you get hold of these materials as well? And the armories, these are the first building you can build nationwide to recruit manpower. This building gets unlocked in the Age of Renaissance under the Professional Armies Institution. Armories can only be built in urban locations. So depending on how many cities you have, that will actually limit, especially early game, how much manpower you can get and how many units you can make at a time. And then later on, as you progress, this is the training field. You can see a similar layout for this. Monthly manpower is still plus 10. Can recruit regiments here, yes. You can see the same production method there, how it upgrades, and then also what you need to actually build this as well. And training fields are the first building that allows you to recruit manpower out of rural locations, so anywhere in your realm. This is unlocked in the Age of Discovery under the Pike and Shot Institution. So as you progress early game, as you've already seen with these two buildings, trying to get hold of those institutions is very important for warfare. If you're trying to do some early gains, you want to get these as soon as you can during these eras because it gives you a massive advantage in warfare. Being able to build these buildings, unlock other units, other galleys, other ships, all these kind of things that come down to warfare. You want to get to these as soon as you can if you are going military focused, or if you think you might get attacked. It is that balance. Do I want to go for more banking related things maybe? Or do I want to make sure my army is good enough to actually fight people off so I can build some banking things? So anyway, that is how that side works. Every standing regiment has to be maintained financially, but can also drill very similar to EU4 and can be upgraded over time as technology progresses. You will manage to transition from standard men-at-arms and archers to halberdiers, musketeers, and cannons. You can see here an early gunpowder unit. I'm not going to try pronounce the name of it, but this is available in the Age of Discovery and is unlocked in the Pike and Shot Institution, as they were just talking about for that previous building. They have higher initiative than other units, but take more morale and strength damage as well. So you can see on this screenshot now the different factors that make up like how powerful a unit is, like their flanking ability, how quick they are, their initiative, also the logistics, like how much food do they consume, how quick can they move, all these different things. And when you're playing this in game, you can hover over these things and it will tell you what they do as well. So it is a lot of things going on there, a lot of icons. But once you get into the game and you've learned them, it's not too hard to keep track of this. And one very cool feature they don't really talk about here is when you're recruiting these units, it will show you in the UI which ones do better at certain things. You're not having to dig into each one. You can look at one and say, oh, that special unit I've got, it's got better initiative than the standard version of that unit as well. So there's a lot of information here, but it's not too bad once you're actually playing it as well. The next unit they're going to show us is an artillery unit, the Falconet, and this is available in the Age of Discovery under the Pike and Shot Institution once again. They have higher combat power than the previous unit, but only do damage in the bombard phase of battles, because obviously they are cannons in the bombard phase. That does make sense. And you can see here again the battle statistics, the logistics as well, and then the maintenance and the requirements for construction as well. So again, you can look at this at a glance and see what they do, what they're good at, what they're bad at, what you're trying to do, maybe who you're going up against, would they be good against them as well? So they are some of the units you'll see in the game. There's a whole bunch more of them. They're going to show some of them in the rest of this dev diary. But as I've said in previous dev diaries, especially the Tinto flavor, They've gone through some of the specific units, some of the special flavor units as well. So do go back and read or watch my videos on those, and you can see a lot more information as well. The next thing they're going to talk about is army organization and command. Armies are structured into a left, center, and right flank, and the reserves as well. This will crucially impact where your troops meet the enemy on the field of battle, playing a pivotal role in how battles will play out. The speed at which each regiment enters the fight is determined by their initiative, so in some cases, you want some units that have high initiative because they will engage the army quicker and get that advantage as well. Cavalry and light infantry will usually be quicker than, say, heavy infantry, and this will make a difference in the battle, as if one line collapses, the center will become vulnerable to a flanking strike, devastating the morale of your army. And you can see an example of this here. This is a battle between Russia and Sweden, showing you how this system looks when a battle is taking place. You can see the phase it's in, the dice roll, how many troops there are. You can also see the stats there as well, like the army-related stats and that next kind of tier of information. You can see who's attacking, damage that has been taken, and then as they were saying, that left, center, right flanking system, you can see that on the screen now, and then those arrows, like who are they fighting? As they just said, if one of the flanks falls apart, you'll see those arrows kind of turn to the next flank, and then they can do that flanking attack and really cause some problems. So you do have to take account for this. It is mostly automated, like how this sets up, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But if you're going in there min-maxing or have a special idea of what you want to do, you can choose as well which units are in which one, who would be in reserves for those ones as well, and really fine-tune what you want to do. So as you can see here, this is the third army. Again, you can see the general, what kind of troops they have, what they're currently doing. They're trying to occupy somewhere, the three flanks, and then below that, the reserves as well, and then the list of every unit available in here. This is a mid-game composition with 38 regiments. Each regiment is assigned a front, with the reserves and logistical support sitting at the back, which is that last kind of longer line in the middle as well. So you can see how this is set up. Probably always want to have a stronger middle because they can fight, you know, all three in theory. But you can see there how they've broken it up as well, how big the army is, and the different flanks as well. So again, you can see this every time you're trying to do something. Figure out what you want to do, see where you want to set up your troops if you want to, or just generally leave it how the AI does it. And then you can also see on the left-hand side of that, a bunch of buttons. These are things you've probably seen in EU4 and other games as well. It's like splitting it in half, telling it what to do. Do you want to detach the siege equipment? Do you want to detach a logistical unit? Do you want to disband it, surrender? Can it replenish troops from garrisons if they're stationed in them? And then also being able to, at the bottom, recruit troops directly into this army as well. They'll be recruited somewhere and then travel to this army automatically. A bunch of options you've got here. Again, a previous dev diary went through all those features, so we won't talk about it too much here. This dev diary is probably going to be long enough as it is. So the choice of your general is very important when it comes to the quality of your army. Your general is usually a member of your court, and his stats are very important when it comes to warfare. You can see that on the screen at the moment. So the admin skill of your general will boost siege ability, help troops get into the fight faster, and the logistic distance of your army as well. The diplomatic skill will boost their morale, initiative, and the consumption of food for that army. The military skill will boost the army movement, the discipline, and the combat speed of the army. So it isn't as simple. You might sit there and think, well, as long as he's got good military skill, he's going to be a great commander. But as you can see from this screenshot, all the different ability points that he has affect different areas of the army. Yes, military is probably the most important one, but as you can see, siege ability, army initiative, they come from different abilities that your commander has. So it's really trying to find somebody who's balanced across all of them. And then there are traits as well that can modify this. I don't think they cover that in this dev diary. Very similar to Crusader Kings in some ways. It was also in EU4, but you can get traits for certain people where they're particularly good at sieging, particularly good at initiative or something along those lines. So it isn't always as easy as he has good military ability, he's going to be the best commander. You will take other features into account as well. And then one last thing they mention here is that make sure you choose the right general, because changing them during warfare isn't as easy, again, as Crusader Kings, where you just press your general, change him to somebody else, and they automatically change. If your army is in warfare in another country, when you change the general, it actually takes time for your general to travel to that army. So you do have to plan ahead and think about it. It isn't as easy as choose somebody whenever you want. You do have to plan that to get the best out of your armies as well. And then speaking of armies, what is army composition? Well, armies are composed of infantry, cavalry, artillery, and auxiliaries. Each of these groups has an upside and a downside in battle, and the modern era is one of transition of these kinds of troops as well. During the late medieval era, the start of this game, heavy cavalry is one of the strongest units you can field and can be decisive in battles. But as the game progresses, warfare will transition to infantry-based armies with artillery support and cavalry dedicated to precise and powerful shock troops. So really playing out that change that we did see historically, Within each of these groups, there are regional, cultural, and technological variants from English longbowmen, Ottoman janissaries, and Polish winged hussars. And then they're going to show us some of these units here. So the first one is longbowmen. These are a unique levy only available to England, although that's not technically true. I think if you play Scotland and you're a vassal under England, you can get a different version of longbowmen. They're not as good, so I guess that is technically true. The best kind of true. These levies have incredibly high initiative, allowing them to enter the battlefield very quickly compared to other levies. So if you can get these as England, you're going to cause a lot of havoc with your troops. These could single-handedly win you fights. If your armies are roughly the same size, but you have longbowmen, they're going to get into that fight quicker, cause some damage, and that could tip it in your favor as well. And again, you can see on the screen the stats around these, the logistics they require, and then the maintenance and construction of them as well. So you're probably going to try and get hold of these as soon as you can as England. The size of regiments will also vary throughout the game, with the early versions of your regiments generally being around 100 men. With later tech and reforms, some regiments can be up to 3,000 men, drastically upping the size of warfare as you progress through the game. You can see that in this example, the Hunters, and this is 1,600 men. The previous one was 1,000 longbowmen. So you can see as it progresses, the armies just naturally get bigger and bigger. These are available in the Age of Absolutism, and they are unlocked through the Siege Artillery Institution, requiring 1,600 manpower for one regiment, as we just saw. And again, you can see the battle statistics, the logistics, what's required to recruit them, and then also the maintenance and the monthly maintenance as well in troops. So as you can see, the later units that are professional ones, you need to build those armories, different buildings that provide you manpower, because you need those to, one, recruit them, and two, keep them going as well. Because obviously population die. It isn't just the same 1,000 units in 1600 as they are in 1800. You need to replenish them as they die, basically, and that's why it's showing that monthly maintenance costs for them as well. To accompany these large armies, you also need to rely on auxiliary regiments. For example, early in the game, the camp follower unit will increase your army food storage, allowing your troops to go deeper into enemy territory without a direct supply line. So yes, you do have supply lines. I'm going to talk about that later in the dev diary. But if you take your army away from your lands, they will use up their food. But if you have these auxiliary units, you can basically bring food with you. You can even shuttle food to your army, just having like mini auxiliary armies. You could do that as a way of doing this as well. They don't necessarily always have to bring it with them directly. You can see that on the screen though. Camp followers, 50 people in this one because it is an auxiliary unit. The battle statistics, don't bring them into battle basically. The logistics of them, and then also the maintenance and things like that for these as well. And as I said, they were going to talk about logistics and food, and they're actually going to talk about it right now. So logistics and food, in an effort to create a credible warfare system, moving your enemies around will depend on supply lines and access to resources. Armies can carry food, but ultimately we need to gather it from friendly locations. This is represented by a line linking your army to the closest friendly location, and you can see that on the screen at the moment. But this line can only be stretched so far and could quickly become vulnerable to enemy armies, so you can actually block these off with your troops. So if you see an enemy army, you can try block this off so they don't get their food replenished, and then that could just naturally attrition them to death as well. So many different ways you can play out the military side of this game as well. So what happens when your supply is low? Well, your army will start suffering attrition and suffer losses, sometimes forcing a retreat of this army. Placing supply depots and controlling key provinces will be the key to efficient campaigns, as planning and strategic decisions will now determine the outcome of most wars. So again, getting away from EU4 where it was just build an army up, send it off to war, throw it into a big pile, see who wins, who's got the biggest number, or they've won, well that's the war won now. Well in EU5 it's about strategically planning, like where am I going to attack, do I have the supply to get there, are they able to block me off? Can I blockade somewhere? Can I get food to that army if I need to? I think it makes the wars that little bit faster as well, because you can't really prolong a war for a very long time, especially early on. As you progress, yes, the wars can last longer. You have different tech, different units that can make this easier, but especially early game, you have got to be careful, because again, early game, they are your levies. So if they die from starvation, it isn't again like Crusader Kings or EU4, oh well, I'll just make some more troops, good times, let's go. You are losing those people from your industry, from your realm, and that does have long-lasting effects to you as well. And then they obviously couldn't resist a Napoleonic quote here. I have defeated the Austrians by simply marching. This is Napoleon, yeah, just marched around. Ultimately, the Austrians didn't do so well out of that, did they? And then on top of all these logistics, as they mentioned at the beginning of this dev diary, you'll also have to take into consideration the weather and diseases. The map, the terrain, natural elements are also your enemies during wartime. Winter reduces food production and raises attrition of your armies, but can also freeze coastal seas, allowing risky crossings and sometimes stranding fleets. Severe winters can also make some mountain passes impassable. And you can see on the screen here, this is a cool example of this. This is a coastal sea zone that's frozen, so this army is able to walk over it, maybe attacking you from a location you wouldn't expect, and again, freezing out the sea so ships can't get in, blockading you. All these different ways the map can actually change during these events. There is like the mini ice age as well, that was covered in a previous dev diary, and that will affect like where you can fight, what happens. Yes, you can cross this frozen water, but watch out. If it gets around to spring and summer, well, your army will just drown in that area, so do be careful. And as they said, it even makes mountains impassable, so that will affect where your troops are going as well. Maybe you can shuttle people into a certain area and then defeat them as you fight them in a place you're better at fighting. So again, different ways the world can actually affect your warfare as well. And then as they said, diseases also are a factor here. Your army can actually bring a disease with them, maybe intentionally, who knows, maybe some kind of crazy warfare you're going to do. And this will also infect the locations they go to. So you can bring that to the civilian population of a country you're fighting and really cause them troubles, especially later on in the game. Bring like smallpox or something to an area. That will reduce their industry, and that might be the tipping point in a war that you're trying to do as well. So with all that being said, let's get to the actual bit you're all here for, and that is battles. So once your army is built, your logistics are ready, it is time to fight. Once on the battlefield, the battle will begin with artillery fire, raining hell on the poor souls you've sent to die for your nation. After that, the main combat starts. Engaged regiments will fight according to 3 positions, as they mentioned earlier, the left flank, the center, and the right flank. Each unit will fight until opponents are either eliminated or lose morale and retreat, then proceed to attack the next regiment in the list basically. And you can see that on the screen here, a lot of stuff going on here. The UI does get kind of busy sometimes, but again, on the left hand side you can see, very similar to that earlier screenshot in this dev diary, who are the generals, who's taking part in this fight, and also the unit types and things like that as well. So you can pause the game and then look, see what's happening. Maybe you've made a mistake. Well, it's too late now. You've got to see what will happen during this combat. And then as they were just saying, if a regiment retreats, it is replaced by another one from the reserves. But ultimately, you will run out of troops on this flank. And when that happens, the morale of the army starts to get hit, and it can lead to the collapse of one of the flanks or even the center of the army. So once you collapse one flank, the flank on the other side for the other army will then start coming around and actually flank the central one as well. So that can lead to a cascading effect and win the battle for you that little bit quicker than if it kind of played out for a little bit longer. And then the next screenshot they're going to show us is the same battle, but you can see on the left hand side, one of the flanks has been defeated. So the bottom army is now able to turn their left flank into the central part of the main army, and that's going to cause them to have a much better time in this fight, and they're probably going to win this fight because they've got all 3 flanks available. The top army really has trouble here, really getting defeated, and it's only going to snowball further and further as their different flanks are defeated. And as we've seen all the way through this dev diary, battles are not that simple. There's a lot of factors that you have to take into account. That is unit types, technology, numbers, commander skills, army composition, terrain, morale, discipline, and sometimes, yes, a little bit of luck. All these factors are vital when ensuring victory in battle. So it sounds very complicated. There is a lot more going on here than even EU4, but it is all things you have to take into account. Even if you're not that interested, these are things you should probably take account of in some ways in your campaigns. And I think it makes it a lot more interesting, a lot more variables in this, a lot of different units as well, especially coming from EU4 where there wasn't really that many different units in the game. In EU5, what we've seen already, there's so many different units, so many different ones in different ages. As they were showing off earlier, the Longbowmen, the Hussite armies, things like that. These are going to be really fun to field in your armies and see how they affect your game as well. There's going to be a lot of learning to do, but it's going to be a lot of fun learning as well by the looks of it. The next thing they're going to talk about is naval warfare, obviously very different to land warfare. There's a lot more water in most cases. Naval warfare has not been left aside in these new updates and will follow more or less the same rules as land warfare. Population to man the ships are sailors. You'll need specific buildings to field more ships and have more sailors, and having a standing fleet is necessary to provide food support for each army as you go across your global empire. So you do have levy navies at the beginning of the game, but even at the beginning, you're generally building out a proper navy as well. And then as they mentioned here, they didn't really talk about it earlier on, but again, this has been covered in a previous dev diary. You can feed your armies with your navies. You can bring food along the coastline, feed your armies, and that can help you as well. Fleets will also allow you to blockade cities and cripple your enemy trade. These are both crucial tools when it comes to warfare. You can see on the screen at the moment, this is Italy, this is the Duchy of Milan even, and they are using their ships to reinforce their troops and also blockade some places they're attacking as well. So again, a very important area this. You need to build up your navies, or at least be ready for it if you are needing to do naval warfare, especially if you're doing, say, like the 100 Years' War. You've got England and France, all those navies. Being able to be dominant in the navy side of it is going to be very important, obviously, for crossing the channel, getting into England if you're France. So a very important area of the game during the entirety of the game as well. And then, as they did say, the naval warfare does have a lot of variation as well. There's different sea zones, and as we saw earlier, climate can freeze different areas, things like that. This will impact fleet movement and combat ability as well. Obviously, if you're fighting in a sea, if you're fighting in the Mediterranean, that's going to be a little bit more stable for fighting than if you meet a fleet in the middle of the Atlantic or something along those lines. And different ships are going to be better at different areas of warfare as well. So they're not going to cover it as much here, but there are different ships, especially if you're in certain areas like Iberia. They have special ships that are better at certain things. So again, very similar to land warfare. There are different ships, different buildings, different sea areas that can affect your sea combat. Get a good admiral, and the admiral skills, again, very similar to the land generals, affect different areas of your fleet as well. So again, a lot going on with the naval side of the game as well. And then obviously, as you progress through the game through discovery and colonization, a strong navy is paramount to allow you to extend your empire across all continents. Because of course, if you have colonies in Africa, America, Indonesia, something like that, if you get into a war with somebody, they can break those supplies, and then they can pick off your vassals or colonies or whatever and take them from you that little bit easier. So again, as the game progresses, navies probably get more and more important, even more important than the progression of land armies in some ways, depending on what you're trying to do. Obviously, if you're playing as, say, China, you're not that interested in colonizing different areas. You're probably not going to have to worry about navies as much. It might not be your focus as versus if you're playing as Portugal or somebody, but even if you're not focused on that area, you will need to focus on it. Make sure they're reasonable at least, so when the invading army arrives on ships, you can fight them off or something along those lines. But anyway, folks, that's the end of the Dev Diary this week. As we've seen, army composition, logistics, combat mechanics, and strategic planning, these are all going to be important in your warfare, and once you've mastered those, you will be able to be successful in the game. Well, most of the time you'll be able to, but obviously if you ignore other things like industry or population, that will affect your army as well. But there's a lot of things intertwined. As we've seen with all these Dev Diaries, everything is linked together. You can't really ignore one thing. Well, you kind of can, but it will affect you in other areas as well. But let me know what you thought about this in the comments down below. I think this looks like such a step up from EU4. A lot more going on, a lot more interesting things happening. Even if you just look at the units themselves, as I said earlier, so many different units, so many flavorful units already. That's before we've got to any DLC in the future. There's so many different ways your army can be brought together, and then the progression from levies to professional armies, and that's going to be really cool to see as well. Trying to keep ahead of that curve with your armies. But as I said, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'm covering all the Dev Diaries. I've covered all the Tinto flavor, Tinto talks. So if there are things in today's Dev Diary that you want some more information on, do go back on my channel. I've covered all of those previously. These are more of an overview of how these systems work, but they've talked about units, how battle works, the flanking system, the Navy, all these different things in different Dev Diaries that were more focused on those areas of the game. But we'll leave it there for today, and I'll see you all next time.